I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Tonight we're starting out with a story that is so shocking, I got to tell you, at first I really had trouble believing it. Is Amazon really selling a chemical mixture that's so toxic that teens are buying it to commit suicide? Well, sadly, a Camas mother says yes, and she's demanding justice. That is our big story tonight. Today in Kent, Washington, a mom from Camas, Michelle Stickley, went to court to confront lawyers from the e-commerce giant Amazon. She's one of 12 sets of parents from across the country who are part of a big lawsuit now trying to hold Amazon accountable. She believes the company is responsible for the death of her son, Tyler. Susanna Frame has our story.
So we were told that he was found about 200 feet from the road. I come down when things are really hard.
3 years ago, a part of Michelle Stickley's heart was ripped from her soul when her 15-year-old son, Tyler, who struggled with depression, died by suicide. And she says the retail giant Amazon is to blame.
Everything was locked up. Our medications were locked up. I checked on him before I went to bed. I checked on him just like in the middle of the night. Everything that I could think of. But nobody said, did you check his Amazon?
Tyler was 3 months into his sophomore year of high school in Camas, Washington. On what appeared to be a normal Monday, right before lunch, he told his mom he was going on a walk.
You just said, I love you, Mama.
Those were most likely Tyler's last words.
And I said, I love you too, baby.
After a grueling 2-day search, a sheriff's deputy found him in these woods on his school grounds, a quarter-mile from his house. There was a water bottle by his side.
I don't even know how to put it into words or like how broken I feel. Like there's some notebooks, I think.
During the search, the family looked for clues in Tyler's room, and they found one on his computer. A recent strange purchase from Amazon, $19.99 for something called sodium nitrite.
And I remember handing him the package, putting it on his bed. And he said, thanks, Mom.
At the time, Michelle thought Amazon had shipped her son art supplies, not a highly lethal compound Tyler would mix with water and drink from the water bottle found by his body.
Do you think that your son would be alive today if Amazon didn't have that on their website?
Yes, I know he would. I know he would.
How could Amazon be responsible for a child's suicide? How would the company know that Tyler might buy sodium nitrite on its website and use it to end his life?
We found they were warned. Records show parents, attorneys, members of Congress, even reviews on Amazon's own website told the company young people were buying sodium nitrite on their site and using it for suicide. The warnings rolled in for 4 years, yet Amazon kept selling the product anyway.
They knew. It's not they should have known, they knew.
Sodium nitrite is legal. It's a common meat preservative, but Amazon was selling a stronger version of it, 99% sodium nitrite, so toxic there is no household use for it. But records show pro-suicide websites were touting a use, an easy and quick way to end your life, even providing links to buy it on Amazon. Tyler's computer history shows he secretly visited those sites in the weeks leading up to his death.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Tyler's family is suing Amazon, and they're not alone. 11 other families from across the country are taking the retailer to court in King County, where the company's based. All the plaintiffs argue Amazon didn't just sell poison, but veritable suicide kits. When purchasing sodium nitrite, the website's algorithm prompted customers to buy additional supplies, including Tagamet, a medication to keep you from throwing the toxin up, and a book called The Peaceful Pill. It's a step-by-step suicide handbook with a section dedicated to sodium nitrite.
Amazon was supplying the means for suicide. It was profiting off of suicide. Amazon must pay for what they've done. They've destroyed every single family whose child bought it.
Amazon told us they extend their deepest condolences to the families and that sodium nitrite is legal. High concentrations of it, they wrote, are not intended for direct consumption. Unfortunately, like many products, it can be misused.
The fact that you know certain people are misusing the product does not mean that you are causing their misuse of the product.
Meredith Mitchell of Colorado appeared at the hearing in Seattle last month via Zoom. After her 16-year-old son, Aiden, died by suicide in 2020, she waged a relentless campaign to pressure Amazon to stop selling the product. Legal records show she placed calls, sent emails, and traded 56 live chat messages with an Amazon employee. My son used it to end his life, Meredith wrote. You're selling things that are killing children to children. The customer service rep assured her the product will not be available after the team has taken actions. That didn't happen. Amazon sold sodium nitrite for 2 more years. During that time, Tyler and several more young people died drinking it.
It's the saddest and clearest illustration of how preventable Tyler's death was.
Happy birthday to you.
Tyler Schmidt's family remembers him as a compassionate soul. He loved his siblings, animals, and science. He was a gifted artist who also battled the demons of depression. His mom says they did all they could, but that was no match for Amazon.
I think it's my job to keep him safe and healthy. And Amazon didn't let me do that.
So tough to watch that. In court today, Amazon lawyers argued the company is not to blame. They say, once again, the fault is with the people who bought it, not with them. They want the entire case tossed out of court. The judge did not make a ruling on that request today. If you or someone you know is dealing with thoughts of suicide, please know there is help available. You can call 988 any time of the day from anywhere, and someone will be available to talk to you. That number again, 988. Let's move on now to Oregon government. Governor Kotek spent Thursday morning in Salem trying to fight for her housing bill. It's the one priority she has this session for lawmakers. It's Senate Bill 1537. It includes $200 million towards housing infrastructure, $200 million more towards financing for moderate income housing, and more money for site acquisition, local planning, and accountability. The governor says the legislature has that money.
But what we can't see happen is that this legislature leaves at the end of their session without this bill. There's money in this bill, and you know what? You have the power. You have the resources to allocate to this bill. You can say we are going to do housing production differently over the next 3, 5, 10 years, because that is what Oregonians are asking us to do.
The bill does include expanding the urban growth boundary. The governor's office says it would only be in limited cases, though. Here's Matthew Chabold from the governor's office to explain that.
Which would temporarily allow a city one time to add 150 or 75 acres of non-resource land, exception land, or urban reserves if they meet a whole series of criteria. Cities have to meet a land need criteria and an affordability need criteria. As I mentioned, there's no high-value farm or forest land. It's limited to non-resource, exception, and urban reserves. There's a cumulative cap in metro, so 600 acres, regardless of how many cities would be interested, and cities themselves are still subject to the 150 or 75 acre cap. And then 30% of all housing in these expansion areas would be legally required to be affordable, which would be one of the strongest inclusionary housing requirements in the United States.
It is still early in the session. The bill will likely go through a lot of work and possible changes. Another work session is scheduled for next week. We'll let you know what happens with this bill. Speaking of government, let's talk for a moment about Portland's cash-rich Clean Energy Fund. I want to share my opinion on something that might soon be happening with it. First, what is it? Well, it's a tax on big retailers, a tax of 1% for their sales within the city of Portland. It was promoted as a way for Portland to meet its community-wide electricity needs with clean, renewable energy by the year 2035. It's supposed to help pay, quote, to accelerate greenhouse gas reductions and energy efficiencies, especially in underserved communities. Voters loved that idea. They passed it by 65% back in 2018. In Section 6 of that new law originally creating the tax, it defines what the money can be used for: renewable energy and energy efficiency projects, and regenerative agriculture and green infrastructure projects and clean energy jobs. Nowhere in there does it say or other items that members of the City Council might want to spend money on. I point that out because our friends at the Oregonian report the fund has already raised nearly $600 million and is expected to bring in a total of $1.2 billion in the next few years. And that's way above what the city earlier thought it would bring in. But now we hear two candidates for mayor for the city of Portland itching to spend some of that money on pet projects. In December, Willamette Week reported that Commissioner Carmen Rubio, who's running for mayor, wanted to give $540 million from the fund to the City of Portland bureaus over the next 5 years. The bureaus are tight on money, so you can definitely see the temptation there. Except that in my opinion, that's not what the money is for. Now, I think they're going to stretch and bend the definition of energy efficient projects any way they can to try and justify spending it. But I'm not buying it, and you shouldn't either. More recently, they've even stopped pretending. This past week, Rubio went even farther. She says she wants to set aside $3 million in the fund to pay for Portland Street Response. Now, that's the group that sends teams of people to people in crisis instead of sending the police. The very next day, Rene Gonzalez, who's also a city commissioner, also running for mayor, took it up a notch. He suggested using $12 million from the fund to help backfill the budget of the fire department. Now, they both argue that it's not really money from the fund, it's the interest that money of the fund is making while it's waiting to be spent. And I got to tell you, this is why voters don't trust politicians. The money generated by the fund and the interest generated by the fund, it's all the same thing. It's all the fund. Come on, you guys, use it for what it's for. Don't swipe it for pet projects, period. That's my opinion anyway, and you don't have to agree, but you should communicate with me. What do you think? Send me an email. The address is thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090. When we come back, we're going into the KGW vault for a look at the new Carissa disaster 25 years ago.
The new Carissa sits on the sand, consuming itself and its fuel burning from within. Tonight we learned the ship is severely cracked, split with a huge fissure running vertically from the waterline and on the other side.
Yep, we'll show you how it all unfolded. So what were you doing 25 years ago this week? I know it's kind of an odd question, but I know what I was doing. I was right here helping with our coverage of the new Carissa. It was a big freighter that ran ashore along the Oregon coast near Coos Bay during the night of February 3rd, 1999. We're going to take a few moments to explore the vault and go back in time for what became one of Oregon's biggest modern environmental disasters when it comes to shipping. Our environmental reporter at the time, Gary Chittum, fielded some of our first reports.
It's already rough enough in the shallow waters off Coos Bay. At low tide, you can see the 600-foot bulk carrier is firmly grounded, and it's in trouble. Watch how this powerful wave batters the deck and the crew of the ship.
It's rocking out there. This morning they had 20 to 25 knot winds and easily 20-foot seas.
The fear is the steady pounding of the waves could rupture the fuel tanks of the ship, or worse.
As the hours went on, we could see that it was definitely stuck. It got there because they arrived in a storm the night of the 3rd and then tried to anchor about 1.5 miles offshore to ride out the storm. But the anchor line was too short and the wind and the current pushed the ship toward the beach. At first, at least for me, it didn't seem like it was all that dangerous environmentally because the ship was empty. It was going to pick up a load of stuff. Then we learned it carried 359,000 gallons of heavy bunker fuel oil and another 37,000 gallons of diesel fuel. And that made it very dangerous for the environment. 4 days after it beached on the shore, 2 of the 5 tanks started leaking oil. Here's our reporter at the time, Tina Kim.
Black veins of bunker fuel run along this Coos Bay beach. The oily mess spans about 3 or 4 miles north from its source, the new Carissa. For 4 days, waves and wind have whipped and punched the 600-foot-long, 38,000-ton cargo ship. On the 5th day of being stuck, it looks like she finally gave in. Notice the corner of the screen in this video from a Coast Guard photographer. Shiny black pools and rivulets now lie beside the ship.
What were you doing to contain it? Absolutely nothing. There's nothing that can be done out there.
Bill Milwee is a spokesperson for the ship's owner. Green Atlas Shipping is based in Panama. He says nothing can clean up the oil while it floats in the water. Crews wait until the residue hits shore. 50 to 60 people now screen through the sands of Horsefall Beach. Milwee estimates less than 1,000 of the carrier's 400,000 gallons of oil has leaked.
Oh, you're picking up with shovels, with rakes, with solvent materials, and it's nasty, dirty, hard work.
Now, I have to say, I loved Bill Milwee as a spokesperson. He was always colorful and had great things to say. But the oil leak would get much worse, eventually killing more than 3,000 seabirds. As concern grew about more oil spilling, the unified command that was running the emergency response, well, they decided it was just too dangerous to try transferring the fuel off the boat onto another boat. And so the best thing they decided to do, they said burn it. As a storm approached, they gave it a try. I covered it from our helicopter Sky 8. Watch this. You'll see 2 small flashes. There were explosions, but, you know, not a lot happened there. And so the very next day, February 11th, 1999, the Navy pitched in with a whole bunch of explosives, 600 gallons of napalm, 397 pounds of plastic explosives. Again, the idea was to burn up all the oil that was sloshing around in the ship and keep it from going onto the beach. Here's how that went.
The new Carissa sits on the sand, consuming itself and its fuel burning from within. Tonight we learned the ship is severely cracked, split with a huge fissure running vertically from the waterline and on the other side. Navy bosun mate Bill Lee placed explosives on the ship and saw the gap up close.
It's as wide as a person. It's probably from the keel halfway up the side of the ship.
Here's a look from Sky 8. That line down low on the left is not in the water. It is the ruptured steel. You're looking into the burning hull. Salvage expert Bill Milwee says the ship could break up.
And he was right. The ship burned all night and into the next day. And look at the middle there where that light section is. That's where the crack is, and that's where it's all coming apart. And then we went back to look at it again using our FLIR camera at night. We saw that, in fact, it had broken in 2. The next morning revealed the problem had not gone away, although the experts later estimated about 255,000 gallons of the oil had indeed burned up. But the new Carissa was not finished with Oregon. Half of it was eventually pulled off the coast, but then a tow line broke in a storm. And by March 3rd, it had floated all the way back to the beach, this time at Waldport. Eventually, it was towed 280 miles out to sea and then sunk by a Navy destroyer and a submarine. It took 9 more years, but eventually the rest was cut up and removed from the shoreline at Coos Bay. Still ahead, a community that wouldn't let their local news go under. The Eugene Weekly is back in print now, the message they have for everyone who helped them come back. That's coming up when we return. Throughout the past few years, we've seen several local newspapers throughout Oregon shut down, only to have the community rally and say, no, we're not going to let that happen to local news. There was the Medford Mail Tribune, which shut down last year after more than 200 years. After more than 100 years now, 2 local papers have popped up to take its place. In Eugene, an independent local newspaper shut down late last year after learning they were the victim of embezzlement and had to lay off their entire staff. But this week, the Eugene Weekly is back. It's in print for the first time in 6 weeks. Here's one of their reporters who offered to take the paper route. They were revived by fundraising in the community, a GoFundMe, and personal donations. They raised $150,000 and were able to print 25,000 papers this week. They say police are still investigating the embezzlement, and it'll take some time before they're back to full strength, but they thanked their readers and the community for writing in and saving them. They wrote to us to say, in a time when local papers across the country are disappearing, the weird and wonderful community here in Lane County is changing the story. This unique paper that punches above its weight is investigative journalism, launches the careers of countless reporters, and sometimes sports and occasional typo is printing the week before Valentine's Day. The story isn't over yet. Good for you. And another fundraiser we wanted to tell you about. You all stepped up in a big way for Casey Jewell. That's the woman living in a trailer home in Vancouver whose landlord won't make repairs. We shared Casey's story earlier this week. If you missed it, you can find it on our KGW YouTube page. Get ready to be outraged. She pays $925 a month to rent a trailer, but it has a hole in the roof. And when we visited in January, it had no running water or heat. She got behind on her rent during the pandemic. Despite being on a payment plan, a loophole in Washington state law means her landlord does not have to make repairs, and she does not have the money to move. But a lot of you were not okay with that. You asked about a GoFundMe account, and yes, there is one. And when we shared it with you last night, thousands of dollars of donations poured in, just came in during our show even. 24 hours ago, for example, she'd raised about $5,400. This afternoon, it's up to nearly $10,000. And we recognize some of the names of the donors as some of the regular viewers who watch the story and email us. And we say thank you. Hopefully she can get somewhere clean and safe. If you want to donate, the link is on the GoFundMe page. The link for the GoFundMe page is in Kyle's article on KGW.com. It's about halfway down on the page. That's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. And by the way, a personal note from me, I'm going to be off for a week, maybe a week and a half. I crashed my triathlon bike recently, and now I get to get rotator cuff surgery. Doesn't that sound like fun? But don't worry, the crew has a lot of great stories coming up for you next week. Evan Watson will be standing here to bring you those stories. And remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. Have a great weekend.